us start from the very basics and first of all try to understand what is the need behind studying MySQL, or what exactly is MySQL and what kind of solution does it offers to me. So if you just see the first point, I have written that MySQL is the most popular open source relational SQL database management system. So what does this mean? If you just take the first line, then I have said that MySQL is a database. So my first thing is that MySQL is what? MySQL is it's a kind of database. And then so database is primarily intended for saving some kind of data that is associated. So it can be any kind of data, like data for an organization, suppose data for an online departmental store, suppose data for a mobile vendor. All these kind of data, you can use a database for storing all these kind of data. But I would like to ask you a question, that why cannot we use files for storing data? And even before that, let me first of all tell you, suppose you are writing one program. Suppose you must be aware of suppose C programming language, and if you are aware of C programming language, then you declare the main method, and inside the main method you declare some variables. Suppose you declare an int, suppose ID, and then suppose you declare the name. Suppose I say string name. These variables you declare. But these variables, what is the lifetime of these variables that you are created in your program? They are just created till the program runs. So for example, if this is your RAM, then these variables will be allocated inside your RAM. But once the program finished its execution, these variables, they will be, you can no longer access these variables. Okay. So that means I need some kind of permanent storage in which I can save my data, and for that purpose I need a secondary storage. So always remember that data, you always save data in some kind of secondary storage. So RAM, this is your RAM, and this is the primary memory. We do not use RAM for storing any kind of data that we frequently require. Why? Because RAM data is not permanent. It is data just comes and goes. It lives for the lifetime of the program till the program is executing. But if you want to actually save data and retrieve that data for some later use, then you use your secondary storage. So your secondary storage means your hard drive. So in your hard drive you can save some data. Alright, so your hard disk, or popularly you call this as a secondary storage. So this is my secondary storage in which I want to save some data. Now what I can do, I suppose I write, I clear all this. So we have seen that RAM is not a solution for saving data because it is temporary. But we can have our hard disk, and hard disk can be used for saving some kind of data. Now I can do something like this. I can save data in my secondary storage in the form of files. Okay, so files can also save some kind of data. But why do not we use files, and why we use database management system? Can you tell me the answer? Why file is not a very efficient solution for saving data? See, you can store some amount of data in files. For example, you can store your contacts, you can store your friend's birthday list. But if the data becomes very large, then handling the data through files, it becomes very difficult and tedious job, and data also suffers from some kind of inconsistency. For example, if there are two files, and two files suppose contain the entry for the same employee. Suppose there is one employee, and both of these files contain the entry for the same employee. Suppose there is one employee E1 and his age is 21, and here also suppose the employee is E1 and his age is 21. And now what happens is that suppose 1 year passes away and the employee age has to increase by 1 year. So what it may happen, that I can increase the salary of, I can increase the age of this employee in this file, but I do not increase the age of employee in this file. So in this way, both of these files can become what? Both of these files can become inconsistent. That is why files, storing data in files, it is not very. So that means there is a problem that is associated with multiple updates in files when we store data in files. Like if the similar kind of data is present at multiple locations, and if one of the location gets updated, then it may happen that the other locations may not get updated, and that may result in data inconsistency. Plus also files, you cannot produce data in files from files in very representable format. If you want some aggregate data, if you want to produce some kind of reports from your data which you have saved in your files, then it is very difficult to produce all these kinds of aggregated reports from files. You'll have to write very complex programming logic for that, and that is generally not very efficient. And if you accidentally delete some data, and if you want to search for some kind of data, like if file is very big and it contains many of the records, and if you want to search for some kind of data, then you will have to traverse through the whole data, and then you can find that data. So all these things indicate that files are not very efficient mechanism for storing data. And so we need a database, and we do not need a database, we need a whole database management system. That means a whole software that can offer a solution for our data related problems. So for that purpose, we have databases, and there are many databases that are in the market, many popular relational databases that are present in the market. For example, you have Oracle database, you have SQL Server, that is also meant for storing data, and then of course we'll be studying MySQL, so MySQL is also there, and then PostgreSQL. All these are the different kind of databases that you use. Plus there are also some NoSQL solution, like for example MongoDB and Redis, and these are all your NoSQL database. So NoSQL means it doesn't mean that they lack SQL statement. NoSQL means that not only SQL. So of course our motive over here is not to study NoSQL databases. Our motive here is to study relational databases. And what is the prime identification of relational database? The prime identification of a relational database is that data is always stored in the form of tables. Okay, so here for example, suppose you have a server, and inside the server suppose you have a database. So inside the database, data will be always stored in form of what? In form of a table. So what exactly is a table? A table is an intersection of rows and columns. So how can we say that tables can be used to represent any kind of data? See, for example, suppose I have one real world entity, and I want, suppose the real world entity is what? Suppose the real world entity is student. So you can identify the fields that are associated with student. For example, every student will have an ID, every student will have a name, every student will have marks, and suppose every student will have what? Every student will have a subject. So then what I can do is that I can design a table for that. And how will I design a table? Suppose I say one student is 1, his name is Amit, his marks are suppose 97, and his subject is, say for example, Java. Then I can have one more student, suppose 2, and his name is suppose Webhoff, and his marks are, say suppose 85, and his subject is, say for example, C++. Then I can have one more student, for example 3, and his name is, say suppose Nitin, and his marks are 91, and his subject is, say suppose Node.js. So Node.js is a very popular server-side tool written in JavaScript. So of course we are not going to see this in this video, but still just see this. So this is what this becomes my, see, this becomes my table where data is stored in the intersection of rows and columns. Okay, so this is what is the table. So each row is representing what? Each row here is representing one instance of student. See, this row is representing Amit, this is representing Webhoff, and this is representing what? Nitin. And each column is representing one of the properties of student. For example, this is representing ID, this is representing the name, this is representing subject, this column, and this column is representing what? This column is representing the subject of the student. So that is where, if you have intersection of rows and columns, then you can model any kind of real world entities in that table. So always remember that a relational database means a kind of database in which data is stored in the form of tables. Clear? So let us continue our discussion, and I will just clear all these fields. And So we discussed that we are discussing about relational database, and there are lot many of relational database system that are available in the market. For example, Oracle is one of your database. Then there is one database, SQL server. This is also a relational database. Relational database means in all these databases data will be stored in the form of tables. Then you have what? Then you have MySQL. So these are all relational databases. Then what is SQL? So SQL, what can you tell me? What does SQL mean? Many people carry this confusion that SQL is also a database, but SQL stands for structured query language. So structured query language is a language that you can use to communicate with these databases. So you can use SQL to communicate with Oracle, you can use SQL to communicate with SQL Server, and you can use SQL to communicate with what? You can use SQL to communicate with MySQL as well. So remember that SQL is a structured query language. It is a language that is used to communicate with databases. So it is a 4th generation language, very user friendly language, and it is almost written in the way we generally communicate. Like we want to fetch some data, so naturally we will say select this from this and get me this out from this. So it is almost very user friendly language. That is your SQL language. So always remember, SQL stands for structured query language. So it is a language that is used for communicating with the database, or it is a language that most of the relational databases understand. Clear? So with this, I'll just end this video. In the next video, we will of course continue our discussion of MySQL, and we will see in the next video how can we connect to the MySQL database, what is MySQL server, and what is MySQL client.